Welcome back to the Mothers. Today is maybe the mother of all episodes, and not because we're scraping the bottom of the barrel for guests and I'm 5 being like, Mom, could you please go on my podcast? But because she's just objectively the right guest and an amazing person to hear from on this topic. A Pulitzer Prize-winning biographer for her book, Margaret Fuller, A New American Life, and a finalist for the Pulitzer for her first biography, The Peabody Sisters, which she wrote over 20 years alongside raising my sister and me. She's the Charles Wesley Emerson College professor of nonfiction writing at Emerson College. Her most recent book is available now, so everyone should go grab it. The essay collection Afterlives on biography and the mysteries of the human heart. It's also dedicated to her grandchildren, which includes my own kids. So yes, we're talking to my mother, Megan Marshall. And also a note that this conversation would not have happened without my dear friend and our head of marketing, LB, who encouraged me to be brave and have in some ways a deeper conversation than I've ever had with my mom in front of an audience. But anyway, I typically finish an interview and shortly thereafter put together an intro. This one has taken me longer, maybe not surprisingly. But what do you say to the world about your own mother that's true and vulnerable and helpful and not too embarrassing? So one thing I've decided is true. Everyone should interview their mother, particularly once you've become a mother yourself. Maybe even use some of our core questions like, tell me your story. How did becoming a mother influence your sense of identity and purpose? What sacrifices were made? What would you say to your new mom self? As someone who's always had tremendous love for my mother, but has maybe not felt as connected as I got older, which is not uncommon, this interview felt like cracking open the universe or tapping into whatever form of universal love and light the quote believers talk about. Hearing her talk about how she cared for me, engaged with me, stood up for me, and saw me when I was too young to remember, when I was my daughter's age now, actually, was so valuable. Like for a minute, we time traveled and we were just two mothers of young girls with dreams of our own and trying to figure out how to hold both. I wasn't feeling alone before this interview, but I felt suddenly not alone after it in a way that made me realize I'd been a little lonely before. Another thing I've realized is painfully obvious, but was kind of profound when it happened to me. On this podcast, we frequently run into the concept of, quote, just a mom. Whether employed elsewhere or not, the just will find us. But here's the thing. My mom has done all these things, written all these outrageously admired books, won the fucking Pulitzer. But to me, she's just my mom. And it's been interesting to think about that just from the child's perspective. And you'll hear V talk about this in the interview. Just a mom is cloaked in insignificance and disempowerment when we use it among adults, I think. But when used as a kid, just my mom, that's a phrase of connection, of pride. Yeah, she's all these things, but she's just my mom. She's mine. There's something about the implicit connection there that we need to bring into just a mom. Just a mom kind of like floats without any attachment to the people we raise, which is where our power comes from. We might say Anne Smith is just a mom, but we would never say Anne is just Sam and Amanda's mom. I've also been thinking a lot about the lifespan of motherhood. As my mom says in this interview too, perhaps the only thing that's true about motherhood is that it's always there. You always are a mother. A former colleague of mine often told me, actually, when my kids were younger, that she was like, being there when they're so little doesn't really matter as much as when they're older and teenagers. It was kind of moving in this interview to hear my mom talk about how she parented me in all the big and small ways when I was little, before I could remember anything. These times that my colleague was saying were not important. And to hear her tell me now, here I am, a 40-something mother, hearing my mother tell me how she parented me when I was 7, what I was like when I was 7, was actually like deeply moving and like built this whole full circle moment for me. And I felt really connected to something that was also about like sort of the longevity of all of this. So I don't know. It made me think that any time of parenting is probably important, and it'll evolve over a lifetime to figure out when and how. But I think the biggest thing that this interview gave me was empathy, which is why everyone should interview their mother. She really loves me. She really wanted to be the mom to me that her own mom couldn't be for her. She also really wanted to cultivate her own self, her own desires, her own identity. And she really tried, just like I'm really trying. And we're all really trying. As my mom says in this conversation, I don't believe I was the perfect mom, but I tried. And maybe trying, honestly, is the point. Anyway, go interview your own mother. But for now, here is Pulitzer Prize-winning Megan Marshall, who also happens to be just my mom. Yay, Mom, so glad you're here.
Thank you. Yes.
How do you feel being, I mean, you're a podcast expert. How do you feel being here?
I have done a few
Are you
podcasts,
intimidated?
but maybe now about as many as you have done as a host. So I just want to say I'm so thrilled that you're doing this. When you mentioned it to me last fall, you had a few options. And I think I said, the mothers, that sounds good to me. But I didn't want to, be heavy handed about it. But I'm so thrilled. And you're doing such a great job. Very professional.
We
That
try.
she is.
We're so profesh. Thank you. Yes. No, I do remember that when I went to you with my post Google, probably 3-ish ideas. And this was the new entry. And I definitely remember you not in a heavy-handed way at all. You responded to that one with a little more intrigue. Not that you were dismissive of the others, but you were like, tell me more about this.
And I think that was before you had the idea of including V, which I think is brilliant. I've always loved V since she's been in your family's life. And she's got an amazing, creative side to her caregiving and her personhood.
Thank you, Megan.
I love hearing her contributions to the show as well.
Yes, I know. I think
very lucky.
It's the perfect mix, the perfect ingredients. So I know you're biographer, Megan Marshall. Feel free to be Mother Megan Marshall on this while we're here.
Yes, that's
or both.
My expectation.
All of them, which is part of our conversation too. But I have lots of good questions, I think, or I hope. I don't know. I will record a separate sort of full introduction to you. So people will get the, a version of your bio ahead of time. But despite that, we do like to start with kind of opening up to the guests to sort of share their storyline and how we get to the Megan of today. So I don't know if you would be open to kicking it off with your version of your story.
I like this question, and it reminds me my very first book, which was published just 2 or 3 months after you were born, was based on interviews with single women about their dilemmas about life and work and love and that sort of thing. It was called The Cost of Loving. And I had this set of questions that I asked all of them, but I really kind of wanted them to tell me their life story. They were in their late 20s and 30s, a little bit older than I was. So I like this format. But I was thinking, what is the through line or the plot to how I got here? And I'm older than some of the people you've interviewed, so I don't want to give you 70 years, but
the older the better as far as I'm concerned, because I feel like
going back to the beginning, in the 1970s, I'm 70 and I was beginning on my professional voyage in the 70s. And I'm remembering how in college, we women wanted to break into the professions, and somebody arranged to have some professional women speak to us about what it was like in business and law and medicine. They weren't even like divided. Who cared the difference? Just break into something. And it was all very exciting. And then at the end, one of them said, well, aren't you going to ask us about, how we have children, how we put children into the mix? And we were like, no, children. And it's, kind of ran away. Who's thinking about children's? And that was kind of where I was in 1977. However, I was still, trying to figure out how might I make a difference? How might I do something with my life and my education? And I was able to persuade my psychology professor to let me write a paper in which I interviewed 3 women who were in the professions I was considering. One, a lawyer, one poet who was a professor, and the third, an English professor, And I interviewed them, and it was like so depressing. I went to see the lawyer. The only reason she had time to talk to me was that she was on this 2-month maternity leave with her little baby. She was so tired and could hardly speak. And I had signed up to take the LSAT, but I just didn't go. I thought, I don't want this life, even though I wasn't really thinking about having kids. I just saw how tired. I hate being tired. The professor,
Me too.
who had been my mentor, and she had just found out that she wasn't going to be rehired, and it was, miserable. And then the poet was so busy teaching that she couldn't write poetry. So, there I was. What was I to do? I'd fallen in love with your dad. We were in love. We
Mhm.
were living together even before we graduated from college, and we thought we were like so grown up. We knew what we were doing, and we just continued this life kind of almost like, even though we felt grown up, of college students
Yeah.
writing our books and that sort of thing. And and I know one of your questions is, how was it? How did you kind of hold on to your identity, or what was your sense of identity as you transitioned from the before mom to mom?
Mhm. Yeah.
I remember very vividly, I was starting to write this book about single women, even as I had gotten married and I was pregnant.
Mhm.
And I realized this is like kind of wacky, but the thrust of the book about the single women was that these women had become so consumed with their professional identity that they were kind of forgetting the human, the family. And I was very bent on not letting that happen to me.
Yeah.
I was happy to be pregnant, but even as I was running around talking about a book about single women, and my big worry in a way was this, the love that I had that had brought me marriage and a family and a life. What was going to happen to that when this child appeared? Did I have enough
Mm.
love to rear a child?
Mhm.
And as soon as there you were, I kind of sensed and knew that love begets love.
Mhm.
So I didn't really have that kind of conflict about, I don't know. That was the conflict that I worried might emerge. And I thought already decided it was important to open my heart to marriage and family. And then I began working on this book about the Peabody sisters, which was another way really of tackling these questions: women's lives, how do they make choices, work and family and that sort of thing. And it was a so much bigger project than what I'd done before. The first book I took a year and a half to write, and this other book I said, well, it's going to be twice as hard. It should take 3 years. And that's
Mhm.
what I put on for
Mhm.
the contract. And at 3 years time I was still doing the research. It was just an enormous project. And so I guess the challenge for me became, given that I wanted to be the kind of mom that I was. You've talked a lot about the just a mom thing.
Hmm.
I wasn't really just a mom, but I was more just a mom than I was anything else.
Mhm.
I wanted to be there for you, partly because of my own experience with a working mom who was the support of our family and who really couldn't be there in the way she wanted to be. So that's when the kind of learnings came about the importance of making these choices, my commitment to making the choice to be there for you, even if my book would suffer. And this book did take a very long time. But I think those questions, the question I was trying to resolve in my own life, how to fit family and children, pretty soon I had wonderful Josie.
Mhm.
um, uh,
Yes, how many kids do you have and how old are
yes,
they?
I have two. I have two, and almost 7 years apart, And
Yeah.
so I guess I would say I was worried about being able to write and being a mom. I did
Yeah.
a lot of thinking, but we can talk about that later. But just to get kind of through this trajectory here, when I was able to reconcile in my heart that the decision I wanted to make was children always first, illness, I'm home.
Mhm.
No more research trip, whatever, learn a kind of patience with that, which in a way I sort of learned from the Peabody sisters as well. There they were living 200 years before and making these same kinds of choices that I felt were important to me to make for family,
Mhm.
for, if a brother was sick, if a child needed help. Family was very important to them. And even Elizabeth Peabody, who actually the oldest of these three sisters, one married Nathaniel Hawthorne, one married Horace Mann, and Elizabeth was the friend to Emerson and Thoreau and all of that. She started a magazine called The Family School because she felt that children and families should be brought together through literature and ideas. And she had this wonderful idea that's transcendentalism. You think, alone in the woods and
Mhm.
God is in nature. Her idea was the social principle. That was her transcendentalism. And it started
Mm.
with the mother and the child, a
Mm.
love that they shared, and it extended in concentric circles out. So, I was kind of being a mom and thinking about mom as even in ideology. And finally, I finished the book. And around the time that you were about to graduate and Josie about to go to college, and, you've talked about different stages in life, there was a time where I could then take a job teaching at Emerson, where I was teaching. It was just like this wonderful thing, teaching students who were about the age of my children. And I felt maybe I could be, understanding to them in a certain kind of way and learn from them as well. So one of them just wrote to me recently saying that, he read about my recent book and he said, "Oh, there's my down-to-earth, kindly professor." That's how he saw me. And
That's
it made
so
me very
sweet.
happy.
Yeah.
So here I am, writing books a little more quickly. And even though teaching also takes up a lot of time, my time is more my own, but very much being the mom is the thing, that brings it all together. I think that the engagement, what I didn't, quite know or understand about being a mom was that it would be so very engaging and I would learn so much from it. This is like kind of the driving principle of me, I think. I love to learn. I'm very curious. And I also love to be passionately involved in something. And that's what being a mom is too, for me, and I think for everyone. So there's maybe not so much a division. And I think I wrote better about the Peabody sisters because I had lived the kind of life that they lived, more so than perhaps someone who had hired assistants and whatever to somehow put their life aside in order to write a book.
Within that is an opening question that I was very curious about, which is a cautionary tale that we've talked about in these podcasts. And I think it is informed by your work. It shows up in Afterlives, is this cautionary tale of women who have given up passions and dreams, often in support of allowing their husband to pursue theirs while they care for the children. In Afterlives, you flagged this Sophia Peabody. You correct me if I'm wrong because you're the expert. Youngest of the Peabody sisters,
yes.
Wife of Nathaniel Hawthorne.
Yes.
Who author of many novels, who I think most known to the average listener, the author of The Scarlet Letter, 19th century author. But you pulled out this quote earlier in one of the earlier essays, and Sophia was a painter, an artist. And she says after her first kid, and someone had offered to maybe even provide childcare to care for that child, Sophia says, quote, "Painting for the present must go by the board, and what is more shall go." And then you say her children would be, or she says, her children would be, quote, "the best pictures I ever painted." And then she never painted again.
Yeah. You're making me cry.
I know. Well, I'm going to make you cry more because the next section that I did want to read, that is a little bit longer, but I think it's worth reading. V and I have both read the left-handed essay.
Yes.
Megan, you had me crying this morning. Yeah. I found in the most beautiful way.
Yes.
I'll let Sara read whatever quote it is, and you could quote the entire thing, and we could talk
about it. But
yes. Go ahead and share, and then we can.
Yeah. So this idea of sacrifice, and I think we can debate whether that's the right word for it, but theme for you, theme for all mothers, theme for maybe all humans, but particularly shows up in Motherhood. So this conclusion of Left-Handed, which I'll try to read also without tearing up, but and this is preceded by a few paragraphs and pages of you kind of looking at the mothers in your life, your mother specifically, but also the mothers in her life, and kind of reflecting on seeing how they've put their careers and ambitions aside, and what does that mean? I'll start at this place where you say, because I think you were starting to be a little maybe critical of these husbands going off and being successful, but these women were incredibly competent. Why weren't they out there getting all these accolades? And then you say, "But I was forgetting the lesson I'd learned. Do not judge a woman, even a woman of ambition and capability, by her accomplishments. I study my mother's gorgeous, inventive landscapes on the walls of my apartment and see that all those signed Elva Spies," your mother, "are dated 1946. Her wedding was in June of that year. Did love for the flawed man who became my father give her the energy and inspiration to paint at peak capacity, even while holding down her first full-time job after college? Of course she married him. A different portrait of my mother forms in my mind's eye, one of the maturing woman whose words in weekly letters I've been reading. Her left-handed life unfurls, the to-do she instigated at the personnel office in Cambridge, to finally get her raise. The stoic self-exhortation Dejection, quote, dejection serves no purpose. 2 decades later, after another of my father's work failures. And through it all, the everyday details of my childhood and my siblings, in school and out. She's the mom I knew, yet whose inner life had, until now, like those of my biographical subjects, awaited my discovery. She's seated beside a mountain path, sketchbook open in her lap, pencil flying as her family pauses to rest on a hike. The page is no longer blank. And we all wept.
Oh,
Truly.
And there's so many angles on this and so many ways to reflect on this. The two questions that, and it's beautiful. And it obviously is moving to anyone that reads it, especially the people on this call, because deep in this is this grappling with giving something up, but gaining something and trying to see that as whole as opposed to a sacrifice. And I'm curious, the two questions that popped for me, and you could take it in whatever direction you want, but I want to understand or hear you think about, like, what do you make of the sacrifices that are inherent in motherhood and that are arguably inherent in parenthood and life, like whether you're a mother or not, like sacrifice is part of the experience. How have you come to think about that? And then I also do want to touch on this, the judging of a woman based on their accomplishments.
yeah.
I need you to know I have that quote, just that written down on the piece of paper next to me right now. So
Well,
obviously,
you say that very well, Sarah, your question. And maybe I'll just speak to the second question first, because maybe it answers the first one in a way. It was a very long time working on my book. But so my life was so full of your lives, Sarah and Josie's lives. But I still felt, I had this part of me back from college and the first book. I don't miss deadlines, I had never missed a deadline until this book. And I never mind success or failure, just meeting the deadline was something that I had trouble living with, not having done that. But it was partly through Sophia Peabody, who before the wedding, I think, before the marriage and before really giving up the art, she also suffered from various illnesses. And I think she helped me to see that I wasn't a bad person if I didn't finish the book. I shouldn't condemn myself. In fact, I was letting myself do other things that I valued greatly, and that things that, I remember going to Josie's kindergarten class, and the teacher said, "This is the first year," this makes me cry, actually. The first year, there's no mom to volunteer to be the class mom. All the moms are working, which they should be. It was a change, but I remembered back to when I was a kid and no moms worked, and the moms gave so much to the school. And I had given a lot to that school. And I could tell she was sort of turning to me saying, "Megan, you have a book, but I didn't do that, There's so many things I did do, but the work or the gifts of being a person in the community and giving to the community are so important. And I think, that's part of what we're suffering from now in the country is so many, nobody has time to make community, and let alone be in community. So that, I guess that's kind of my answer. I really had to forgive myself for that missing the deadline. And I was, in a certain way, the only one really condemning myself. I was so grateful to the handful of people who believed I would finish this book. Many of them, like eminent professors. Why do you think I could finish? But anyway, in kind of taking the pressure off. And even before that, one of the things, you ask about the dark times, as I was sort of transitioning into this acceptance, I used to have a huge amount of built up frustrated anger, just waiting in traffic, because I had to get home and get those few minutes in if I could. And I would just be bubbling over with this frustration and anger when my kids were so little. And, it wasn't anger at them. It was anger at the traffic or whatever. I started leaving things, forgetting things. And I just said, this is not healthy. This is not good for anyone. No more frustration. Sit in the traffic, accept it, be patient, And I kind of was able to do that, but I also was, I mentioned my mother who also did like Sophia Peabody, she didn't really stop painting, but she did not paint at the level at which she might have. And she also didn't, she couldn't be the mom she wanted to be either. So she was, life demanded a lot of her. So I was grateful for being able to be the mom I wanted to be, maybe above all, and to be there, pushing you on the tire swing after school as we were walking home, or bringing Josie along when we were going to your music lessons or soccer practices and playing with her on the playground, or doing the poo sticks at the bridge at river school as the water ran under it. I just value that seemingly meaningless time together, but that is really so important for both mother and child to feel there in the world. And I'm glad I could do that. So, but back to this, to the sacrifice, I think there are moments where it feels like that. You're aware of this kind of choice, but if you have the strength to know the answer, then you're okay. It's when you're not sure. It's when
the answer to,
well, let's say, I remember once you were playing basketball, and Rich Kelly was scouting for kids for his AAU team. And, he sort of said this, well, have her come down and I think she'll like it, But this meant driving to, the Higashi school in Randolph at rush hour and stuff like that. You were
I do
already
remember
doing
those.
many other things.
Yeah.
And I think Dad said, you don't have to do this, but I knew I had to do this. I mean, you didn't have to do this either, but I don't know. I think you're happy you did the AAU basketball.
Definitely. Oh, definitely.
And it was so different from the soccer. It was just an entirely different demographic. And I loved meeting the people that I met through you, and learning, that's one of the things I was going to say, the learning that I had through being a mother, all these sports, which I had been kind of athletic, but there weren't team sports when I was growing up. And I think actually one other thing I wanted to say about learning and about being a mom, and this was early on, and I've said this to you before, when you were in kindergarten, this before Josie was born, you'd gone to preschool, and you were always like really smart, and you were playing the violin, and you could, somebody put like this plastic bat in your hand and you thwonked the wiffle ball 100 miles or something,
That's right, Sara.
And,
Get it, girl.
And here she was in kindergarten, like, this is school. School's about learning. School's about achievement. And we go to the first parent night, and the teacher says, well, your child has chosen a word that they printed out and they decorated it, and then we laminated these words, and they're hanging up around the room. Go around and see if you can find the word that your child chose. And I'm looking for, thinking like, I don't know, there's no one word for like kicking a ball far or something like that. But, my mind was on
So
school.
curious to know your word, Sara.
And I couldn't find it. So the teacher had pointed out, and the word was kind.
I know. I do remember you telling me.
And it was like, I don't know how to, it was like I was slapped in the face or something like that. This is what matters to Sara. This is what matters in life. This is what school is about. And this is the learning I'm starting off on. Kind. And then I saw how, around that time, I remember we were in the science museum and looking at stuff, and in the gift shop, and she picked out something, and I just couldn't get Sara to leave the gift shop, and what was she doing? She was like in the books section. She said, Grandma, my mother, loves birds. I want to get her a bird book. And I thought, oh.
She reminds me of
I thought Sara was like,
daughter.
wanted to get more toys or a stuffed animal for herself. It was like she was thinking about my mother, who you really didn't see that much.
Yeah.
But you felt a connection.
Sweet.
And then like in drawing class, we have to get, I've forgotten the name of the drawing teacher. We have to get her, we had these pencil sharpeners, electric pen. We have to get one for her. We have to get one for her,
Oh, I do remember the electric pencil sharpeners, actually.
Yeah.
Oof.
The old days.
Oh, that's so sweet.
That learning was, I think, very important down the road when I had to be, kind to myself and also accept, or, live the life of kindness that
Yeah.
is such a basic value. And not everybody has the opportunity to do that. We're all very pressed. But anyhow, the social
Yeah.
principle.
Yeah, totally.
So thank you for those learnings, and sobering, but inspiring.
Yeah. What is I feel like this idea of not judging a woman by her accomplishments, and the fact that you specifically call out the ambitious, capable one, like all women, all mothers, all women, but also shout out to the particularly achievement oriented, maybe. I think that resonates with so many because all of us feel like we should be 5 rungs farther along or something.
Yeah.
So, and in your reflections on it, it sounded like a lot of it was actually in kind of not judging yourself was kind of what released you from that pressure of accomplishment. But I'm curious if that's true, and where, like, how should we be
How
judging
do I do
ourselves?
that?
Well,
Yeah. Is it
I
community,
think
as you were saying? But
Yeah.
I think that, the book, I mean, Miracle of Miracles, the book that I wrote ended up being very successful.
Right.
I don't know if
Yes.
successful is the right term, but it's
It
successful.
is.
It's not like it sold a zillion copies, but it was admired by historians
Right.
and biographers, the people, the
Yes.
very people that
It's taught
matter
in
most to
college
me.
courses now. Yes, absolutely.
And, I think the first book, The Cost of Loving, I wanted to make a, like smash hit, and
I do remember
it
this.
was
You might not be telling the
popular.
story because you don't want to, but it was going to be on the cover of like Time magazine as like am I making this up?
Yes,
Right?
Newsweek.
It was going
Newsweek.
to Newsweek. It was going to be featured,
Even
and
better.
then some horrible incident happened in America or something, and it was
That
removed.
was the end. And I
Yeah.
also,
No.
yeah. Um, but I think that I do think there are good things about that book. The introduction is kind of interesting, but
Yeah.
it was written to try to make, I don't know, try to hit some kind of popular spot or whatever.
Yeah.
And when I think part of relieving myself about the deadline was also saying this is a book that, I needed to write to satisfy I wanted to write the kind of book I would want to read on this subject.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I often tell my students, write the book that you would want to read on this subject. Then you'll have satisfied your standards. And it doesn't have to sell a lot. It doesn't have to win prizes. Although, I just consider that the most amazing luck that I have lucked into. It was the right time. It was the right judges, whatever it was.
Yeah.
But write to meet your own standards. Try to develop some good standards too, I guess. But, you wouldn't be writing if you didn't care about writing. If you weren't,
Yeah.
actually, many of my students don't read as much as they should, but still.
I hope they're
And I just
listening.
want
Pick
to
up a
tell
book.
you, I maybe have said this. I'm also amazed that you remembered that about the Newsweek, because I thought I had forgotten that until just recently myself. It
Nope.
came to
I'm here
mind.
to keep it top of mind.
But
Remember all
yeah.
the things you've done.
Yeah, it was painful, that book, in some ways. But
Yeah.
oh no, what was I going to say?
It's okay. You're thinking about your students
Yeah.
who should read more.
Yeah.
I'm
Right.
reiterating that point.
They should.
We
Oh,
should
I know
all
what I was
read
going to
more.
say. Yes. So the
Mhm.
fact that you cried a little bit over my book. When I was little, I loved to read books. I loved to read, especially books that made me cry. And I thought,
Mhm.
this would be the greatest thing to be able to do in life, to write a book that would move someone to cry.
Yes.
Well,
And-
you did it.
I
And
know.
each of that didn't happen with The Cost of Loving, but it did happen with the
Mm.
Peabody sisters. My editor said, I cried at the end.
Yeah.
What more? That was it.
Yeah. I do feel like what you spoke to this already a little bit, but the emotional experience of becoming a mother and being a mother. I mean, your life was certainly not easy before then, and it was full of sacrifices and frustrations and triumphs over that. But I feel like there's a universality in some ways to what it means if you're willing and able to be reflective on the beauty and hardship of being a mother, that I do think, as you were saying this, you kind of tapped into it, maybe opened up the emotional connection a little bit broader and deeper because your work was informed by this universal kind
Yeah.
of shared experience. I don't know.
Well, and also something I was going to say about motherhood, some of the questions that you have on the handout that you sent, and this actually reverberates with what I had written in the Cost of Loving, which was about how these women wanted to control their lives. They felt, I put one foot in front of the next, and I'm a lawyer, and then I'm a lawyer, I'm going to be a better lawyer, and it was the unwillingness to subject themselves to chance that left them kind of out on a limb, actually. And I think that's one of the very first lessons of being a parent, is that, you're out of control.
Yes. Yeah.
The child is in control, or at least the chance. Who knows how this child will turn out? That's actually something I wanted to mention earlier. Margaret Fuller had a child late. She was almost 40. And someone wrote to her, well, you have your book and you have your baby and you must feel proud of them both. And she said, well, of my book, I can judge. I finished it. My baby's just out in the world. I won't know for 20 or more, 30 or 40 years what's the result of this. She really resisted the comparison of the book and the baby. And I have really resisted that too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's very different things. But as you say, they play into one another. The compassion that you learn to have for this child, and that your life is going to be upended and you are going to be changed, for the better. You're going to be expanded. Love begets love.
Yeah. Sai said that in our very first interview. She said, I'm going to not remember exactly how, but she resisted this idea of kind of how does being a mother make you better at work? It was a boiled down version of what we were trying to ask her. And she was like, I reject that question. Like, these are different
it was so good, so
things
brilliant
for
to say
different
that.
reasons.
Yeah.
And I don't expect them to add to contribute to each other. But so, but Mom, one of the questions on the list, and I love that you're, as I said to you, you're the only one so far that has done your homework
and thought about it.
You really hit this deadline and exceeded it. This idea of having it all, which I think given your age group, I don't know. I think this concept of having it all is something that it's interesting as we ask our various guests about it, how much it is lodged in their brain. And I think there's a little bit of, it varies a little bit by age, but I'm curious, the passage we read and all of our conversation certainly relates to this idea of having it all. I'm wondering what you've learned about having it all and what is all.
Yeah, well, looking back, it is helpful.
Yeah.
2020 hindsight. And what I would say about that is you do have it all. You always have it all. You just may not be able to see it.
Oof.
And
I love that.
there are different proportions. I think that phrase, you're right, that having it all goes back to kind of my generation. Can we have it all? And it's maybe a little bit pernicious. But on the other hand, I think if you can open out the sense of it to what I'm doing now, there I was, I wasn't finishing my book, but I was inching away at it. I was giving you the time I wanted. I was learning stuff. Like I learned how to drive all over Eastern Massachusetts and down into wherever. I used to be terrified of driving. I had been in a terrible car crash during college. And you might not know, but I was afraid of driving. But
I did know. I mean, I sensed that you were nervous as a driver, but I didn't know from.
Yeah, I felt it. But nevertheless,
I actually didn't know it was rooted in an actual. Exactly. Nevertheless, we got to practice.
Yeah. But I felt very proud of myself for being able to drive you to the Higashi school and the Smith and Wesson field and all of the Bridgewater, whatever it might be. And like organizing vacations. I was very good at that. Getting us with the frequent flyers to California and these nice hotels and back practically for nothing. So whatever. I'm kind of straying here, but having it all. Yeah. You're using yourself to your fullest. That is having it all.
I remember actually when I was talking to you about what I was trying to figure out what to do, you had said, it was fascinating because no one has used this word. And I'm actually curious if you would stand by the word, but you were reflecting on maybe a similar time of life or constantly in life of how you wanted to be effective.
Oh.
And I'd never heard anyone describe this drive to express my identity. I need to have something that's my own. I need to be a mother and also something else, whatever it is. I'd never heard this like related to a desire to be effective, which is a much more practical way of thinking about it than like achieving something.
I think of you as supremely effective.
I agree.
And I think,
I agree.
And I think you have a need to be effective.
Yeah.
More than any other, like winning something or, I mean, of course it's nice when you win your soccer games and stuff like that, but the feeling of making a difference, or I think in my case, I like making a thing. I like I like making this book. To me, that maybe that's the effectiveness
Yeah.
of it. And here you are making a podcast. That's, not to say you weren't effective before. I think you always are being effective, but you want ownership of that effectiveness, I think, now. And you want to be able to say, I did this and it resulted in that.
Yeah. One of the well, I have a variety of questions. I'm trying to put on my smart hat to have a conversation with you. But
You're doing a great job. You're so smart. You're very effective.
Thank you so much. I'm also trying not to be distracted by the leaf blowers that are obviously outside. Are you
I'm
hearing
not
them? Are you
hearing
okay?
them.
Okay, good.
Can you hear the baby screaming or no?
Oh, I can't.
Okay,
Aw.
perfect. Then we're
Okay.
good.
We're doing a great job. We're doing it all. I wanted to ask this clever question. So, around the truth of motherhood, and another theme in your essay collection and biography overall, and in your recent New York Times book review piece, is
Oh,
this idea of truth or fact. Whether I don't even know if those are the same thing, but what is truth? When should we adhere to truth? What can acceptably kind of be left unknown to a biographer? And there are a lot of examples, obviously, in your recent book, but also in the whole concept of being a biographer. So, a question, this is an impossible question and totally unfair, but we should try. I was curious from your work studying the lives of women and many mothers and having your own experience, what is the truth of motherhood? What's the true story? Because, and obviously there can't be a singular one, although maybe there is. But I ask because one of the reasons that there was urgency to do this podcast, or why it became most interesting to me, was that I just felt like the stories and the version of truth that was being shared about motherhood was like not the full picture. Whether it was right or wrong, unclear, but it didn't fully reflect my experience, for example, and therefore didn't feel fully true.
yeah.
I'm curious if you have thoughts on like
Well,
the truth
I
of
guess
motherhood.
in good ways and in challenging ways, it's always there. It's never not there. Once you're a mother, always a
Yeah.
mother.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
And some people, like, I used to be very fascinated. I know of two cases where somebody had a child and then they just like ran away from it.
Hmm.
Susan Sontag had a child
Hmm.
Mm.
and she left the child with the father. And
Hmm.
you know who Susan, she's a great intellectual, what would you call her? I don't know, just a brilliant mind from
Hmm.
the mid to late 20th century, Susan Sontag. Everybody liked Susan Sontag. But
Hmm.
she had a son and she just
Huh.
went to England,
Yeah.
left him with a dad. And this gives you kind of like a frisson of, I could do that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
she, I think, had to do that. And she ended up with a woman lover later. And the son grew up and forgave her. And they're very close. And he became a writer.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I knew somebody also in before I had gone to Bennington, and then I transferred to Harvard. And in between, I worked as a secretary at Harvard, and there was this wonderful mix of women there working as secretaries. And one of them had been she later became a brilliant. I'm not going to tell you much about her because you'd recognize her, a brilliant professor. But she had left. She'd like married while in college and had a child. The same thing like Susan Sontag.
Mm.
And she just like, I can't do this.
Hmm.
Mm.
She hadn't finished college. She just left and came to Cambridge and was a secretary for a while and then went to graduate school and like closed the door on that.
Hmm.
But she's still the mother of that child. She later had other children.
Hmm.
Anyway, what am I saying? The truth of motherhood, you're
Mhm.
always a mother. But I think that's mostly a good thing. That's
Hmm.
mostly a good thing. I remember I don't know, in middle school, like they're trying to teach kids what the seriousness of having a child. And
Hmm.
Mhm.
one
Yeah.
assignment, I don't know if you had this, but was to, give you like an egg and you had to carry
Yes.
this egg
Oh my
around.
God, I do
We had a
remember this.
flower
And a
baby.
flower. I think we had both. There was an egg
Yeah.
moment, and then there was a
And you
flower
couldn't,
bag of flour.
break this egg. And,
Yes.
The
I don't
pressure.
Yes.
know what that communicated to kids of that age, but
Yeah. Do they still do that? Yeah.
it
Right.
did make me think a little bit. That's
Yeah.
the ever presentness of it is
Yeah.
really kind of a shock, but also the blessing of it. I remember, I think your last person you interviewed was talking about enjoying nursing her child in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, it can be enjoyable once you get it down.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
um,
Yes.
and you'll never have that again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm.
Are
but
there
it can be,
obvious folks that inspired in your life, or and I was thinking about all the rich stories that you've uncovered yourself and these
Mm.
sort of internal lives of women from the past. I was just curious
hmm.
where, oh, is that my baby? That's
Oh
my
no.
baby.
No. Is she
Oh my
crying? Oh,
goodness.
As long as
My
you can't
goodness.
hear, we're good. um, so my question was how, yeah, what mothers inspired or informed how you approached being a mother, if they did?
Hmm.
including your own mom.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Well, I was thinking that I didn't have very many models. And I think some of the models of the people that I've written about or been interested in were very complicated, and they weren't necessarily always good parents. What
Mm.
can I say? But I learned a lot from forming groups of, the baby group, the initial baby group that I had when Sarah was born. And
We love a mom's
um,
group.
yeah,
Love a mom's group.
I don't know if yeah, the baby group, but it was really for the moms. You're right.
Oh yeah.
Um, and I remember there was one of the moms, I'm not going to name them, who was like just really kind of lackadaisical about tending to the children. And, they used to have, before they outlawed them, these walkers. You put the child in a little, like a
Mm.
plastic dish, and it rolls
Yeah.
around and there's a seat.
Yes.
And now they're outlawed. But they're like, this, your child like goes to the staircase, boom,
Yeah.
and another child, fell out a window and was
I
fine.
feel like I remember this story.
Yes, yes.
Yes,
We
we
won't
won't
mention
say
who
more
this
about it,
is.
but I think about it all the
But
time.
I just thought,
Kid was
this
fine,
made, this
shockingly.
this made me feel so much more relaxed that
Yeah.
somebody else could
Mm-hmm.
be so relaxed. I love that. That's what I appreciated from the moms group. I also
Mm.
had my group of women biographers that I started when I guess you were about 2 years old, or even when I started the Peabody sisters, because I kind of sensed, even though I didn't think it would take 20 years, I thought it would be preoccupying, and I needed a support group in the
Hmm.
writing, and I also needed another place to talk about that stuff. But one of the women, they all were older than I was, and one of them had a 7-year-old who was then maybe 10 or something like that, and similar age gap as you and Josie. She had a 7-year-old and whatever. Anyway,
Hmm.
and this friend in the group had spent 7 years writing her biography, and then she, the book came out, and then the next day she comes down to breakfast and she says, well, I'm thinking about what to write about next. And her 7-year-old daughter says, Mom, you can't do that to us.
Mm.
um,
Oh. Oh.
and it's interesting how you might hear that. I heard that, in my kind of cost of loving frame of mind, like,
Yeah.
I don't want my children ever to say that, and I'm going to make sure that my book doesn't invade their lives and they don't feel they're competing with it.
Yeah.
Um, and I think everyone else in the group said, that girl, what does she know? And,
Yeah.
I didn't, there's no right answer to it. But that was what I heard. And it was kind of like a reverse role model sort of situation. I was also
Yeah.
thinking, I was very fond of Justin Kaplan and Anne Bernays, who, a biographer and a novelist, and they were a whole generation ahead, but they wrote together and lived in the house together and raised 3 kids. But I knew them when their kids were leaving high school and in college, and it seemed like the ideal life, but I didn't really see what they went through to get there.
Yeah.
The daughter of their daughter, Hester, has now written a book about trying to connect with her dad, who,
Oh,
as
wow.
it turned out, seemed to kind of retreat into his study, and
Hmm.
she hadn't really felt close to him. So anyway, the
Yeah.
things you don't really know. I'm just saying that you take what you
Yeah.
can of the people around you. And I was, as I said, very interested in what Margaret Fuller had to say about her child. But she was dedicated to the cause of the Italian Revolution, and she
Yeah.
left the child with a wet nurse so she could be there and write about it. And the child really physically suffered, in his first year of life with this
Hmm.
wet nurse who started giving him wine instead of the breast milk because she was
Oh,
feeding her
wow.
own baby, and she
Oh.
couldn't, it was not good. You can imagine. We
No.
know about that anyhow. But I don't fault her for it. I'm admiring, but I'm glad I wasn't in that situation
Yeah. Yeah.
myself.
I'm actually curious that story and Hester's experience. I feel like a lot of this, and even your discovery in the conclusion of left-handed, and all the essays being these sort of uncovering past lives, maybe interior lives of people through sometimes starting from an object. But how much do you think? Well, and you also talked about how relieved you were and how nice it was to discover these things about your mother.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of children of mothers, which are almost all of us, are often wonder, like, what do you think is the responsibility of, and how should mothers be sharing this interior experience in real time with their children? Like, how do we bring this forward more so that it's not sort of in retrospect we learn what it was
It's
really
a
like,
very,
you know?
very difficult, it's a difficult line to tread because I think
Yeah.
kids can take in different things at different times. Remember you once talking about a mother of a friend of yours confiding something in your friend, and your friend was really blown away by this and very
Mm-hmm.
troubled. I guess I have had friends also, yeah, whose mothers made them confidants in their misery or in
Mm-hmm.
their whatever it might be. And I really didn't feel that was right. But there's obviously a whole spectrum of things,
Yeah.
but I think, I mean, for example, there probably are things, learned about my mother. I mean, I learned things about my mother from researching, but there are things that I probably didn't tell you about her life or my kind of whatever sadness in
Yeah.
my childhood because, you know, I wanted you to have a happy childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I don't know. I think my way of working out the sadness, the feeling, my mother couldn't be the mother she wanted to be, put it that way. And didn't really hold it against her, but she didn't have the time,
Right.
to
Yeah.
give. And so I gave, in giving time to you and Josie, I was kind of giving back to myself that time that
Mm-hmm.
I had missed. So that was what I was thinking about. I guess I was thinking about you. I often feel like I'm very absorbed in the child. This is what matters, and what's on your mind matters. And I don't know. I don't really matter. I'll leave that in my
Oh,
office.
Megan.
Um, but I still I enjoyed doing the things we did together. I enjoyed
Mm.
making music together.
Yeah, of course.
I enjoyed bringing you into the parts of my life that seemed
Yeah.
appropriate and seemed educational in some way, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember Josie very much enjoyed coming to she was still in high school when I was a fellow at Radcliffe, and she would come to some of the fellows talks and
Mm.
Yeah.
learn about math or something like that. It was, I don't know, that's
Yeah.
not the same as confiding about your difficulties as a child, but it still is bringing your child into your life. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
I guess I'm always happy now that we're grown up. We're both grown up,
Mm-hmm.
to
Yeah.
answer more questions or say more.
Well,
But
that's why I
Really
brought you on the
sweet.
podcast.
right,
Tell me about your trauma and I'll tell you about mine. It's good.
yes,
Yeah. Well, I
yeah,
do think one thing that folks have said, I don't even know specifically, but it feels like it's popped up in many things that I've read or seen is, becoming a mother, you become a
Mhm.
mother to your own child or
Mhm.
children, but you also, there's a sudden understanding or re-understanding or new understanding of your own mother
yes,
when you're having this shared experience, which I think is also fascinating. And a lot of people being like, wow, actually my friend the other day was talking about how she had three kids back to back to back. And her mother had three kids even more closely back to
mhm,
back to back. And she like I realized this, and she texted her mom at the time and it was just like, you are a beast. Like, how did you do that? So I think there's also this
mhm,
nice, to your earlier point of what is meaning and quote accomplishment, and we shouldn't hold women, or I would say anyone, that's not what we should
mhm.
judge them by, but wouldn't that be nice? That it's about this connection and creating a community and building community, which can be within your motherhood, and even just mother to mother.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I had a similar like thought at the end of Left-Handed when you were talking about your sister who discovered the painting of your mom that she had
Yes.
done and all of these like beautiful things you noticed that oh she was right-handed in this painting and what was she thinking about herself and it made me reflect and think about my mother. Now I also think of her in her passing and I don't think about her failures in the, her dreams that she had to put aside to be a mom, and I think about all the successes that she had, and the things that she showed up for, and the things that she was able to do. And it's so interesting. I mean, obviously we are always going to be our biggest critic, and we're going to say, well, I could have done this and this and all these, but I don't think about those things in her passing. I just thought the ending really got me and was so beautiful, and how lucky she is to have two daughters who are reflecting and appreciating and acknowledging her struggles and maybe her sadness, and also celebrating her accomplishments.
Yes,
So
to
I thought
me,
that
this
was,
is the great victory of this book.
yeah,
It has a work of my mother's art on the cover.
yeah.
And
Was that the painting? I was wondering.
yes, yeah, it's a
I thought
detail
so.
from it.
I love it.
So that's my mother. My mother is on the cover. Yeah.
Yes. So
Yeah.
beautiful.
Um,
Yes.
But I think, my mother died relatively young these days. And as I said, Sara got to know her a little bit, but seeing her as a grandmother was also it was wonderful and reminded me of her sweetness, which I
Yeah.
think you felt, Sara. You may not, I think you were only 6 when she died, but 6
Oh,
or
very
7.
much. That's yes.
Yeah.
Sweetness, thoughtfulness, incredibly
She
considerate.
also, I just
Yeah.
remember this.
Kindness,
She-
just like you,
Kind.
Sarah. You got all of these things
Yeah.
from her.
I'm
Yeah.
trying to remember whether this was before or after you were looking for the bird book for her, but we were driving about and you had found a little ceramic dog that you wanted to buy. And,
Yes.
and
A little golden retriever.
that you put
Right?
in the little bed
Yeah.
made out of
I do
popsicle sticks.
remember this.
And Dad said,
Clearly.
No, these
Dang.
useless things, Mom.
We always say those little things don't matter, but maybe they do.
You
Buy the
do.
retriever.
so
Buy the book.
Dad had said, don't buy it. Yeah, you can't buy it. But my mom sort of secretly bought it for you. Then you cherished this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, well, my mother knew somehow that this
Maybe it did matter.
did matter.
Oh, totally.
You had it, and you made a little bed and blankets for it. And
Yes. Yes. My God, all of this is making me realize
the-
my daughter is very much related to me.
Perhaps
Yes.
the leprechaun should be.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
green in the
A crazy story for another time. But yes, our oldest daughter is, I will never be a good enough mother. I mean, she will love me, and I don't mean it in that way.
You
but
are the
she
best
has very high expectations for things that I don't tend to care about, such as making a whole thing out of St. Patrick's Day and creating a trap for a leprechaun or having the elf. Like none of
This
these
is the
things.
big trial
I'm not
of the
drawn to any
mom.
of these.
It really is.
the
And
project.
I don't know why. And the fact that she comes to me being like, Mom, do you think overnight the leprechaun's going to pee in the toilet?
Wink,
Which
wink.
would then make
Hint.
the toilet water green, and therefore yeah, I was like, okay.
Mom, do you
Maybe.
think
I
you
don't know.
will pee green in the toilet
Yeah,
for me?
exactly. But yes, all the
It is
attention
hard
left
to-
though.
to be the ideal. Yeah. And there were always moms who were doing all these sewing things for their kids or making
Yeah.
whatever that I had to draw the line there. I could drive you to the Higashi school, but
Yes. Yes.
and I was your brownie leader for a year too.
I do remember this. Yes, yes, yes. That was a weird time.
Love it. Brownies.
Well, I know we're running up on time here. I didn't know I was going to shift to our sort of closing questions, but I didn't know, Mom, if there's anything that you had. I know you'd planned much.
Yeah,
I want to make
no,
sure you
I
had
took
time to
notes.
air out what you wanted to share.
Well, my notes, but I think I
And V,
said,
if there are other questions too.
I said, oh yeah, well, I don't want to go on forever, but
Go on.
the
Yeah.
whole writing moms thing. I used to be part of Penn New England, which is a writers group. And before Josie was born, I ran a panel about writing mothers. And I got these different moms out to talk about how they wrote and how they're moms. And then 30 years later, the same Penn New England said, we want to do something on writing moms. Will you do this? And, I think that the writers I know of your generation are better at mixing the writing and the momming and the whatever. I think there's better daycare support. I think there's more understanding of need for maternity leave and that kind of thing. I think that the younger writers I know now are not quite as stressed. But I remembered that there was, speaking of people to learn from, are you familiar with Ann Tyler, the novelist Ann Tyler? She started writing in the 80s and she just put out maybe her 40th novel and she's in her late 80s and she's Big Splash, her latest book anyway. But there was a book about writing women that I read in the 70s or 80s and her essay was called Still Just Writing.
Yeah.
And she talked about she had little kids. Her husband was a psychiatrist and also a writer, but she was doing most of the childcare. And she would pick up the kids from school and the moms would say, "Are you still just writing?" And she said, "Well,
Oh,
Wow.
I'm
Oh,
doing the best I
oh,
can."
yeah.
But she
Yeah.
talked about, keeping the characters in her mind while she was vacuuming, and how sends her son off to camp and he has to come home because he has chicken pox, and just when she thinks she's going to write. And I took that was another part of learning to accept the contingencies of life, the chances that happen. And I do think, again, another way that the Peabody sisters became the book that it was is that they were there in my head, and in the waiting rooms I would keep notes. So still just writing. We're still just writing.
I love that. And
That
hate
reminds
it
me
at
of
the same time.
yeah, my version. I sent this book to you, V. The my version of is it Ann Tyler? Is that the
Yes,
author's
Ann
name?
Tyler.
Anne Lamott is and
Oh,
bird by
yes.
bird is my phrase, which was not necessarily tied up in her being also a mother and a writer, but I think I sent that book to you, V,
Yes, you
and
did.
or the operating instructions for having a baby.
Yes.
Anyway, yes, I agree. She's wonderful.
So you're going to hit me with those last questions?
Yeah. If you could go all the way back and tell your new mom self one thing, what would it be?
Well, I think I would say that you do have everything already with you that you're going to need. You know how to learn things. You'll have the energy back. It will come back. That, you can do this. You might think it's completely foreign and strange and you don't have the slightest idea, but you're good at learning things and you will. And you have the
Yeah.
dedication and energy to do it.
Beautiful.
Oh, so sweet.
Yeah. Okay. If you could provide yourself or your family one thing along the journey of motherhood that would have made the experience, the process a little bit easier, what would that have been? Or some of the things?
Yes. Yeah, some of it.
Where to begin?
Well, I think that, I don't think I was a bad listener, but I think I could be a better listener. I think I was very quick to want to try to fix things and maybe even head things off.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So I
I
spent
think
a
that's
lot of,
something that resonates with a lot of people.
yeah.
Active listening versus listening to fix.
Yeah.
That makes
So I think I kind of learned, this is one of the things I learned from Josie, who would sometimes call. And this is kind of late to have learned it, I guess, but she would call and talk about one thing or another. And I would think we were about to hang up. And then she would ask the thing or say the thing.
Yeah.
While we're at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also found, it's very hard to give advice to anyone and not be heavy-handed, but the listening, the more you listen, the better you are able to maybe even help the person give themselves their own advice.
Yeah.
They might, I don't know. I think I could be, I don't consider myself to have been a perfect mother in any sense, but
Who is?
I tried.
Yes. By the way, I think it's fascinating. This question I wrote assuming it would be like childcare, but everyone's saying things that they wish that they had. It's very motherly. They're like, one person was like, I wish I'd had more patience. Like it's all these sort of,
It's so beautiful.
I wish I had been a better, different,
Right.
or had more of something. And I think that's so fascinating that we're not, even in this moment, we're not like, and free childcare and nanny and longer maternity leave. Like we're still, mothers are always, we want more of ourselves and more from ourselves. I think it's very interesting.
Gosh, Sarah, you need to write something about this, or actually have a podcast about this. But I think that that's really very telling. And, I do think a big difference between when I was, I was, Dad and I were both sort of freelancers, so we had no maternity or paternity leave. But I think you and Josie have been able to be more present moms because of the generous maternity leave. I shouldn't even say generous. The expected.
I know.
In Japan, you have a year.
I know. Yes.
So it's not 6 months isn't enough. It should be a year.
Yeah.
But anyway, you're right. Should have better childcare. Should have more family in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Although
right.
I do have a lot of family in the
Not that
neighborhood.
your answer was right. I'm not. I
Yeah, no,
think
I
it's more
know.
interesting that's
It is.
where we go to. Maybe it's also this whole
Yeah.
conversation has been about us, and then we're.
What could you have done
yeah,
better?
yeah.
But it also speaks to the whole reason that the problem is there. It's all
Right.
so individualized.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. Well, maybe on that note, is there anything that you would like to say to your children who
Are
I hope
definitely listening.
Josie better fucking be listening? No, I'm just kidding. Josie's going to listen. I'm doing my best to be present. No, your kids are probably listening. Anything you'd like to say to them?
Yeah, they're listening now. I think in the other questions you say the kids will grow up and
Or
listen.
one day
So,
they will. Exactly.
yeah.
Yes.
So I was thinking
When
that.
Sara grows up.
When I finally
Yeah.
grow up, I can listen to a
Well,
podcast.
I love you and I admire you.
No.
And I'm always here for you. I hope you know that.
Yeah.
And what a wonderful thing Sara has done. That's what I was going to say. If we were projecting, 20 years from now, the same time frame of your other guests whose children will grow up and come across
Yes.
this, I think,
yeah.
this is a time capsule.
Yeah.
And it's a great record of where we are now. And
Yeah.
so that's what I would say. It's a great contribution. So thank you. And thank you very much for inviting me because, as you know, I have thought about these things a lot, but I'm not an expert. And I like talking about them and keeping the questions open.
Yeah. Well, you do a
And
great
with you.
job. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. One of the things I really, for many reasons, obviously, I love your writing, but I find that there's a tone that is about curiosity and asking a question as much as you are also offering truth as much as we can know. And I think that is a very inviting reader experience as opposed to being someone telling me how it is. Like we're sort of on this journey of discovery together is way more interesting to me.
Well, that was what was wrong with the first book when I went back and looked at it. It was like too telling people what they ought to think or feel.
Oh, interesting.
Or, too prescriptive.
Yeah.
The opening was questioning and raising issues, and I liked that. But maybe I had to learn that over time, that there aren't any right answers and that just probing the questions and opening them up is a big part of, writing, keeping people interested and more true than offering prescriptions.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being my mother.
Well, thank you for being my daughter. And I remember a writer friend said his daughter was always trying, she was the oldest, and then there was a son. The daughter was always trying to get the father to say that she was his favorite. And he just wasn't say that. What's special about me? So finally he said, you're the one that made me a father.
Yeah.
So you're the one that made me a mother. And that will...
Oh, no.
True. It'll probably never go away.
You're always here.
Forever.
Always here. That's the way. Always here.
Yeah, exactly.
Stay here. And yes, children keep you in life. And we need to stay in life.
Yeah. Yes. Well, thanks, Mom. I will plug this more officially in our little close, but this podcast will get out there aligned with some of your ongoing reading book events.
Oh, all right.
So people should go attend. We'll link to the full rundown, but there are events in Newtonville and in Belmont and in Concord, I believe. So yeah, people should go out, buy Afterlives.
Yes.
Try a little bit harder. Get it from a small bookstore.
Yes.
If you really have to, it's on Amazon, but try not to.
Yes.
Thank you. And suddenly the light thing is starting to happen in my office, in my room.
Oh, it looks nice though.
You're great.
It's been okay so far.
You've been excellent. Yes. Amazing.
Dee, thank you.
Thank you so much. I was telling Sara before we popped on that the way you write is so beautiful. And I was like, you might just be my favorite author right now. I will read it again, left-handed. That whole segment was it made me very, I don't know, emotional and reflective. It was just so beautiful. So I appreciate you putting it out into the world.
Thank you. Well, there's a great thrill in finding what I found in those letters.
Yeah, I imagine. Yeah. I said this before, but your mom is so lucky to have you as a daughter and to have her still exist and these memories and stories. I think that's such a beautiful thing.
I know.
So, thanks for sharing.
That's the job of biography, is to, resurrect these past lives. And who would have thought I started doing this for my mother? But I did.
Did a great job of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
All
I
right. Well,
All
V and
right.
I are
say
going to go
goodbye, but
debrief. Yes.
yes.
V and I will have a Fresca session /
Yes, we
ginger
will.
ale. Who knows? By the way, your hair looks awesome. Is it poofed?
Yeah, a little bit.
I like it.
I need you to get banana clips. Okay.
Oh, is that what's happening? This is the banana.
Yes.
Oh.
I'm gonna
Wait,
send you
I
a picture
remember
of what
this. It
it's
was
like
like
from
a
the
weird ad
90s.
that would pop up all the time. How?
Because why did I do it? Oh, because
right next to like Polly Pocket. Like it was very teen
no,
oriented.
literally, yes. Because I keep putting my hair in ponytails, but then it gives it a crimp because I cut my hair short.
Mhm.
And then I was like, how do I get my hair to my face? And it's great. I love it. And I've become a couponer
Yeah.
because I don't know, I needed another job or responsibility. And I got them for $2 at CVS with my
Sick.
coupon stacking and extra bucks. So
Yay. And the extra bucks.
yeah.
Amazing. All right. Well, we'll do a motherly efficient close.
Yes.
Because small children need their mothers.
That's right.
And according to my mom, that'll never go away. I'm just kidding.
Once you're a mom, you're always a mom, like it or not.
I mean, I'm not the right person to do an objective close, but that was really nice for me.
Yeah.
It's also a nice opportunity to ask my mother, those questions. And it's the kind of questions that like we wouldn't, I don't know if our average
You don't get to
daughters
have
asking
that.
their moms these questions. I don't
Yeah.
know. Everyone should start a podcast and interview their parents.
Honestly.
I also I think she had such useful insight. I think it also made me more excited to get more and more. I hate old and not a negative connotation, like mothers that are further out in motherhood, because I think there is wisdom that comes from a distance too.
100%.
And having been through many evolutions of what society did to mothers and how they were perceived and supported or not supported, is like just really helpful perspective. Because so much of it, as even she was talking about the kind of like, how do we remember not to judge women? And I read not to judge mothers in particular by their accomplishments. And so much of that was rooted in like sort of taking a bigger perspective and, I don't know, releasing ourselves from this expectation that was sort of put on us as opposed to something we may have chosen. Or within it, figure out which part of it is what we chose and want. And then like, let's continue to pursue that and hold ourselves to that. So yeah, I'm so grateful for her coming on and sharing and being so open. And I think her book is so open in a way that her others are obviously more rooted in the figures of history. And I think this one really nicely, at least for me, selfishly as her daughter, was really a nice tapping into the inner life of my own mother. So that was really a gift too.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think that what a special thing to be able to look for you. To hear these stories and understand why our parents are the way they are and what they do. So beautiful. Yeah, I cried in the whole section that I read. And just listening to your mom today, hearing about her choices and why she chose to do what she did and the sacrifices that she made, but does not look at them as a sacrifice. It's more of even what she was talking about, driving you to basketball, right? And then she's like, and I learned how to drive because I was really freaked out. And then I did. And I was just like, it really got me.
And that she also acknowledged this deep anger that she felt for a long time, which Jason and I talk about this sometimes, where I'm like, I'm not angry at you. I'm angry at the system that like makes this hard and more problematic than it needs to be and gives us some of the unfairness. And I think useful to recognize.
Like that has existed. She mentioned too, like reading these letters that her mom had written to her friends and all of their partners. All the husbands had these successful like CEOs of biochem and all this stuff. And then the women, all of their dreams get put on the back burner.
Yes.
And the system has been that way for so long. But then during her reflections of like, there were these choices and I wanted to show up for you and do these things. And I wanted to bring you to the basketball lessons, or I wanted to do this, and I just love that.
Totally. It is hard though, because inherently it feels like so much of that is what we all do, which is kind of the rationalizing, the mental gymnastics, this is just a temporary fate, like so much that we do to sort of tolerate and turn something that is difficult and frustrating into something that is enriching and meaningful to us. And that's, the alchemy of mothers, I guess. It's both, it's a strength and also something that I wish we didn't have to do quite as much,
Yes. Yes.
Um,
yes, we can do it, but I wish we didn't have to.
yeah. And I think that's such a power that's essential for living like a mentally healthy, full life. But again, it's like a skill set that, like, to your point, we can do it. Do we have to do it all the time?
Yeah.
And can it be acknowledged? Can we realize
maybe if I just got a pat on the back for doing it, then I could continue to do it.
Yeah. Anyway, that's a gift. I'm going to keep that. It's nice. We'll keep this recording forever.
Yes.
But folks listening should go buy Afterlives. I'm holding it up on screen. It's beautiful. That is my grandmother on the front. And self-portrait, exactly. So yeah, buy Afterlives, preferably at your local bookstore, not conglomerates, but sometimes they're convenient. You can go to meganmarshallauthor.com and you can find a list of her events if you're in the greater Boston area. There are a couple good ones coming up in Massachusetts. We got Boston, we got Newtonville, we got Belmont, we got Concord.
Yes,
anyway,
Megan.
all of the New England hits. Exactly. Fabulous. Okay, V.
Yes.
Where the hell is your joy?
Ooh, baby. Honestly, this is good for me to reflect because normally
in this moment of
think
chaos.
about it. No, like normally I think about it, I want to be prepared, but in this moment I'm like, oh my God, do I have joy?
Right.
No, I have joy.
Yes.
Do you have an obvious answer for yours?
I have a quick obvious answer that's easier for me, but it's funny how it is a forgotten concept all the time. But it's Jason's birthday this weekend, and our tradition is to go on trips with each other for our birthdays. I'm not sure how much longer it's going to last, but he has to be in London for work, so he's already gone. And then I will join him basically on Friday through the weekend. And that will be certainly joyful. In this moment, it'll be really nice to, if I can say that, like, be out of America and look at America from the outside. I'm kind of like needing a little bit of some distance and see it in a different way. And honestly, just hear I just need some perspective.
I think you might find it's as bad as you think it is. But that's okay. No, I'm kidding.
But that will be joyful. And I think it is, God, you really have to. Life has been so chaotic. You know this as well as all of us. Like, you really have to make time, and you have to do the pre-work to make that time joyful. Like, figure out all the activities ahead of time and who's watching the kid, like all of the stuff that goes into giving yourself a moment of joy or a trip or whatever it is. I think it is worth it. And I'm glad that we'll spend time together and celebrate his birthday.
Oh, that's going to be
27 years old. Crazy.
Crazy that we're legal to drink now.
Exactly. We're teen parents out in London. It's cool.
I love that.
Yeah. All right. Where did any sparks of joy hit you?
It actually did. So this weekend, Sunday, so my dad had come to visit this weekend, which was great. It was good family time. And then on Sunday, I was getting a little bit of the Sunday scaries, which is like, I'm not really sure why, because I'm not going into a job, but that's okay.
It's true. It's deeply rooted in the life cycle of life. Yeah,
it is. And also then being like, ooh, now I'm like solo with the kid all week. Like, it is.
Yeah.
Whatever. It made sense. But we were like, okay, we need to get out and go for a walk. And so we went for a walk on the boardwalk that's like right down the street from our house. And we had the most beautiful, like, it felt like we were in Gilmore Girls. I've never seen the show, but in my head.
Is that true?
No.
On purpose? And I'm your friend and I enjoy your company?
I know.
That's so funny.
It's not an on purpose. I was only allowed an hour of TV time growing up. Yeah. And when it was like really popular, I missed it.
I kind of wish you'd binge watched it like in your early days of infancy. Anyway, we can watch it together.
I could still do it now.
I hope you enjoy it. I love Gilmore Girls. Anyway, keep going.
I know the Luke's coffee, but I don't know. I don't know anything.
I just think, quick aside, we almost named all of our kids unintentionally after key figures in Gilmore Girls, which we didn't realize.
Oh no.
Including we were like Lorelai, and then we'll call her Rory, and I was like, this would be weird with all of the other names.
Why do I know these names?
Yeah, exactly.
I love that.
But sorry, I'm taking away from your joy. Go.
You're great. So started our walk. We grabbed a coffee. We're walking maybe 2 minutes, and we see our realtor who got us this current like rental that we're in. And
Yeah.
we're like, that's so sweet. Small town. Love this. And then a few minutes later, we ran into our neighbors and they were like, hey, neighbors. And we had a great talk with them where I found out actually one of them works for USAID, which was like crazy.
Oh,
And I was
wow.
like, are you okay?
Yeah.
So that was amazing and beautiful.
Yeah.
And then we ran into a couple, we've never seen them in our lives, but they had a kid who was similar in age. And so then we exchanged numbers and now we're going to get together. And it was
Yeah.
just this like, this was the right move. And community is so important.
Community and connection. Totally.
It felt so good. And then I was not scared and did not feel so like alone anymore.
Yeah. Yes.
It was so nice.
I'm so glad that happened.
Like,
yes.
Where else would these things happen? Like, I don't know. We left the house just being like, we just need to get fresh air. And then we came home with like meeting 2 new friends and seeing everyone we knew. And I loved that.
Yes.
So that's
that's beautiful. Absolutely. That is joy.
Yeah.
Shared joy.
Yeah. Although I will say, my new friend, if you're listening, she mentioned they went to trivia last night. And I was just like, I don't have the brain to do trivia right now.
I can't do trivia. Although there should be like mother brain trivia because we would crush.
Is like, how long can breast milk be out of the fridge for?
Yes.
4 hours.
What's the period between when you start the feed and when you start the next feed? What size is your child's diapers?
Truly.
And how many are left? Thank you so much for joining us. Please remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss an episode and we can reach even more rock stars like you. The Mothers is a production of Backline Media, shining a light on those who carry the team.